Good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And today we have Caroline Kepnes, who is the New York Times bestselling author of You, Hidden Bodies, Providence, and now You Love Me. She's been kind enough to sign some books for us, and we'll be getting those. I understand they picked them up today, so they'll be wending their way to us shortly. And I'll put, for those of you watching on Facebook, I'll put a link to the signed copies if you'd like to order one. Let's see, her work has been translated into a multitude of languages and inspired a television series adaptation of You, currently on Netflix. Kepnes graduated from Brown University and then worked as a pop culture journalist for Entertainment Weekly and a TV writer for Seventh Heaven and The Secret Life of the American Teenager. She grew up on Cape Cod and now lives in Los Angeles. And then with her today is Chad Kultgen. Hope I got that right. And he's going to be doing the heavy lifting on the interview today. And he's a graduate of the USC School of Cinematic Arts. And his novels include The Average American Male, The Average American Marriage, The Lie, and Men, Women, and Children, basis of a feature film by Jason Reitman. And Barbara Peters is joining us from her home office today, or library? Office. And I'll be monitoring the Facebook comments. So if you have questions for Caroline or Chad or Barbara, go ahead and put them in the comments field. And then I'll emerge out of the mists about 40 minutes or so in to ask some of your questions. So Barbara, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I have to say you did all the heavy lifting on the introduction. I can just take my sheet now, fish it aside. And as I understand it, though, just to add it, the two of you have worked together in television. Is that right?
No, not together, but we both worked in television.
You both worked in television. All right. So I wasn't sure the origin of this pairing this afternoon. Your friends, your colleagues, your fellow authors?
That's it. All three.
Yep.
Yeah.
All three. A trifecta, and I hit it. That is so exciting. Well, I wanted to congratulate Carolyn on her review in the New York Times yesterday. Sarah Weinman is the new crime columnist for the Times. And in fact, Patrick and I, because we do so many reviews, we're going to do a conversation with Sarah next week just to talk about book reviewing and so forth. But I did quote it in completely in the e-news that we send out to all of our customers today. And I thought it was a really interesting review. She's different than Marilyn Stasio, and I like what she has to say. So I'm not going to ask you if you were pleased with it, because that'd be really stupid. But did you feel like she was sympathetic to what you're doing in the book?
Oh yeah, I felt that, like, when the kids say I feel seen, it was one of those moments. I feel like she really got what I'm doing with the character and the psychology of him, and that was great to see that. And yes.
Yeah, no, I liked it a lot. And I have to say that I struggled some with the moral basis for Joe.
I think that means you're okay.
Yeah, and you love me. And so I'm going to be really interested to see what you and Chad have to say about it, because, you know, there's not enough anti-heroes, so to speak, but I wouldn't call him that either. Maybe he's more Highsmithian. I don't know. You know, Tom Ripley waving at us. Anyway, over to you, Chad, and I'm looking forward to what you bring out.
Yeah, thanks very much. So we are, of course, here to discuss Joe Goldberg, which is, as Barbara just said, he's a character that you read and you don't know if you like this guy or not, because on the one hand, he's very charming and very smart and very funny. On the other hand, he murders people. And so that makes him a little hard to like. So one of the things that I find very interesting about your writing in all of your books, but obviously in the Joe books, is your character work. You get into his head, first person. This is a psychopathic murderer who is stalking multiple characters, doing what he will with them, creating torture dungeons, all kinds of crazy things. But also your books are very well plotted. They have very intricate stories. And so I'm curious, in terms of your process, is it just for you, like Joe gets in your head or you get in Joe's head, or however that works for you, but you're in the mind of Joe, or Joe is in your mind and you just kind of follow his voice wherever it takes you? Or do you plot out hardcore plot mechanics, what your story is going to be, and then put that voice through it?
It's a combination of both, and also thank you for letting us be here and talk like this. I with each book, as I think about the ending and where I want to end up and why I want him to do or be in the situation and emotional place that he is. And then some days I let myself go off thinking this isn't the book, but this is me figuring out the book. And then other days I have that file where I'm like figuring out what he's doing. But I love to like walk through the world and think about what he would do with this situation. Like even the other day I saw something on a post outside, like someone put up a physical piece of paper complaining about a neighbor. And I was like, if Joe knew this person, if he read this and thought this is hysterical, he would find this person, you know. So it's always in the back of my head, and that makes it fun and also overwhelming to go and start a new book because there's so much in this world to use in a story like this.
So is Joe kind of constantly in your head?
Not all the time, fortunately, but there. Like, especially when I'm doing, here we are on Facebook Live, and, you know, very aware that I write 3 books now of this character who's like, why is everyone doing this? Why is everyone always showing everyone everything and letting them know exactly where they are? Like, so it's there.
Well, your first book of Joe came out in 2013, or that's when you first started writing it?
Started writing in 2013. Yeah.
Okay. And obviously Joe is very well versed in how social media works and how cell phone technology works and modern communication technology works. That's part of how he's able to do what he does, is by looking at somebody's Instagram or their Twitter, whatever, taking control of their Facebook messages or their text messages so that he can manipulate people into whatever scenario he wants. So in 2013, the landscape of our technical communications is vastly different from what it is now. Has that been a challenging or interesting part of writing 3 books with this character who primarily uses cell phones to kind of like get what he wants? And those have drastically changed in those 8 years.
Yes, and it's gone, like, I was afraid of it back then and alarmed by it. Like, I'll never forget the first Instagram post I did and this feeling of like, oh, I'm venturing into another area. And I've always been very hesitant about all of it and kind of stubborn in my own way. Like, I was the last person I knew to text. I do things slowly. I only started texting because I had a birthday party where I thought all these people didn't show up. They were mad at me. It turned out they were texting and I didn't have texting on my phone. So like, okay, so it gets to that point. And then once I'm in something, I was working for Yahoo at the time, and they gave me the password to their Yahoo TV account. And it blew my mind. I'm like, I have, you know, they have all these followers. I just started freelancing for them. I could go on here and say anything. And that kind of fascinated me. And then in the old fashioned way, like, we've always, especially when we like someone, we can get a little carried away with wanting to know things, wanting to control things, wanting to see where they go. And all of this makes it possible. So I feel like there's this element in us as humans, and then all of this makes it so much easier for someone like Joe to, you know, cross into the dark part of that. And yes, the more that there is, the more that I'm like, oh my God, how do I keep up? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're now living in a world where the primary relationships we have are parasocial. They're through screens with people who don't know we exist. And so I think Joe is in some ways kind of, he really metaphorically is that piece of all of us who are doing that. Like you're saying, like looking at somebody we don't know and then gleaning some kind of information from whatever might be in their Instagram, whether it's an actual picture or just the style of it or whatever.
Yes, and then also unknowingly or knowingly projecting what we want them to be onto it. That was always my point with him, that he's interacting, like he's the reason for a lot of the things that he thinks, because we all have our own headspace, our own ideas about people. So that's what I feel like is that step that we're not always aware that we're making. The way sometimes it feels like something is designed to make you happy or to make you feel something, you know, all of that. And he's, yes, he's on here a lot. I lost my train.
Right. Could I just say something? I was looking down because I found the quote from the New York Times. And I had it in my phone and I wanted to. One of the things I find fascinating about Joe is his capacity for rationalization or self-delusion, whatever you want to call it. But I love the way the New York Times book review that we mentioned opens. Caroline Kepnes must be some kind of storytelling sorcerer. Well, right there, magic, right? How else can Joe Goldberg, stalker, creep, multiple murderer, blamer of everyone else but himself, a long overdue book, the one you thought was coming, be such an entertaining narrator? And I mean, that is a real conundrum, I think, is that this guy, do you really want to spend any time with him? But yet, is he irresistible because he's so entertaining?
For me, anytime you look at someone's material, you're being a little bit of a voyeur and you're putting yourself out there too. So you know, it's the way that they show us the number of likes and we see the response in real time. And Chad and I talk about this a lot, about the new serotonin of it, you know, and then what that means for some people, meaning that we all have, if we're involved in this at all, there is a little bit of that spirit in us. And not as much as Joe, but that's where I go. I feel like that's what people recognize, and it's repulsive, but it's also relatable. And I just love that territory. You know, I think that if you can laugh at yourself about what you do, then that's a good thing when you're reading a book or, yeah.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that you were late to the party with text messages and technology and all that. Meanwhile, you're writing a book about a guy who's very good at it all, who can look at like one Instagram post and be like, I know everything about that person's life. So at some level, you also have to have that skill. You have
Yes,
to be a
because-
little better at all this than you're letting on, I feel like.
Yeah, no, better at it, but like I feel like in an obsessive way, like I have that obsessive gene. So sometimes when I've been writing in a coffee shop, you know, when there's that people are doing that performance conversation and you can feel them like, you know, they're talking, they want other people to hear. I feel like it's not just an LA thing, it's an all over thing. But anyway, like there was this one day, these two people are talking, and within 20 minutes, I just wanted to be like, I know where your kids are. I know what you ate last night. I know everything. I just, you know, I know your friend, like I can tell who you're mad at. I can tell who you like. And I know that that's me reading into it. But yes, I'm a little investigator. I love doing detective work. So if anything, that's what scared me about this, that like, oh no, I can so easily spend time just getting lost in like someone else's life, which just in the end feels weird. It's a weird way to spend your time at times. Like you read a book and you're supposed to get lost in there, but when you lose time to like looking at someone else's pictures, like you couldn't walk into someone's house and do that. So yeah, I'm self-conscious of my, like I'm a born snoop. On my 40th birthday, my friends took me to an Airbnb and they all went in the pool and I'm like, I'm gonna go look through the house, you know? Shouldn't be saying
that's like,
so well.
That's a part of like what he does. So I assume you're going to have to keep up with all the new modern technologies. Are you on TikTok yet?
I'm not on TikTok, but I see them. And when people send them to me, I look, I have that same like reluctance of like, oh gosh, it's another area. It's another password. It's another medium. But yeah, there's probably going to be some TikTok in the next Joe book because I don't think that one's going away, you know?
It's not.
Yeah.
And then whatever's next and whatever's next. As long as Joe is around, he's going to have to be on some social media platform.
Yes, but there will also always be messages and things in our public and our physical world that get him going too, which was what was fun about this book, like taking him to a small town where he's like in the, you know, on the street with people and it's a tighter community.
Yeah.
I like that real life stalking too. Yeah.
Bainbridge Island you're talking about. So tell us about that. What led you to decide that's where Joe is going to try and plant some roots if this man is capable of doing such a thing? And what was it like? Did you go there? What was the motivation?
Well, that area, like it's always sounded dreamy when I've read about it with friends that live up there. And you know how that is when you live here and there are those places that you hear people romanticize. Like, oh, I want to move up there. Life would be different. It would be beautiful. It's, you know, calmer and it's not that far away, but far enough. And then I discovered Cedar Cove and I fell into that rabbit hole and I climbed in deeper and deeper. And I remember this was years ago in like 2018, being at events talking about Providence and, you know, weaseling in Cedar Cove because when I'm obsessed with something and I'm in it, I'm like, I can turn anything into a conversation about Cedar Cove or grownups too, as you know. And anyhow, then, so I wrote the first draft. And I thought a lot about why, in particular, this would appeal to him. And I liked to put him near the water. I liked the smallness, for someone controlling to be on an island where it's easy for him to know if someone's leaving. That right away was like, oh yes, this would be appealing to him, especially after dealing with all of this LA stuff and a wealthy LA family. He would want to go somewhere that's contained. You know, that's because it's like the island itself is sort of a cage in some ways. At least that's what he's hoping. And then I did go there. It was amazing. I talked to realtors. I went to houses to look at the basements. And I think I creeped a few people out and made some friends. So all very good.
What was that experience like where you're like, excuse me, can I look in your basement? I just need to see if I can picture a torture dungeon in here. That's all.
So much worse than that. In the first few chapters of the book, he's on foot and he's in a neighborhood. So I'm walking around and I'm in someone's backyard and they're outside like, hi, can I help you? I'm like, oh, I'm not a psychopath, but I write books about a psychopath, and I'm just seeing how much I can hear. And I realize as I'm saying it, like, oh my God, I'm trespassing in someone's yard.
Yeah,
At the same time, the way a lot of these neighborhoods are designed, you're not trespassing. So you can stand there. And everyone I met, fortunately, was like very nice and trusting and good. So I don't think I scared anyone too badly. But yeah, realtor, like this one realtor, when I kept wanting to go to the basement, and it's this beautiful house. And I told her that this was research, but we get down to the basement and it's a scary mess. And I'm like, oh, I love this. You know?
You're like, it's perfect for my psychopathic murder book. I'll be imagining your basement every time I'm writing my next murders.
Yes.
So in this book, or I should say in the last book, Joe becomes a dad. Not that he's raising a child, but he sires one. And now in this book, we get to see a little bit of what he's like in a family scenario where a child is involved. And I think, you know, Barbara, to your point, like, why is this character so appealing? He's committing all these heinous acts. I think one of the reasons is that we get to see him in these other situations where he's actually commendable. Like, he is kind of a good dad, not to the child that he has to leave behind, obviously, but to the character in this book, he's not a bad father figure to her. He, you know, supplies good advice and kind of gets her to stand up for herself. And I think that that is, for me, it's one of the most compelling things about him, is in every other way, other than psychopathic murderous rage and stalking people, other than these crimes, he's actually kind of a decent guy who tells the truth. And so what was it like for you to kind of come up with that? Or why did you want to start exploring these ideas of him being a father figure in a family?
Well, to Barbara's point earlier about rationalizations, it was in part because I like that something terrible to happen to him, and for him to genuinely think about the welfare of the child, because what he won't say on the page is that he did it. He had a kid, and his ego is sort of satisfied in that way. Like, he's proud, and he's trying to think that somehow this will all be for the best. But at the same time, like, he had this desire to have a family. And I loved the idea of him going to this new place already burning for what we saw at the end of the book that was on his mind. He thought he was going to have a wife and a daughter. He wanted these things. So now he's going to go and get them. And I think that's, in an overall level, something that also, I know it keeps me going when I'm writing about him and he's doing terrible things. I'm like, he is his own cheerleader, and he does believe that he's helping other people. And even though it's not, obviously not always the case in that, there's a lot to be said for someone who is doing things for a good reason, for calling a selfish act selfless. Like, it's a larger scale of what a lot of us do in smaller situations. And he convinces you that he does have those good things in mind. At least he convinces me, the reader, as I'm writing, if that makes sense, you know, like thinking, am I buying this? Am I with him? Do I think that this is how he would feel right now? And I like him for that in those moments, without the murder.
Yeah, without the murder. Even the murder, though, you buy it back. Ultimately, I think because that character's honest with himself.
Yes.
And that's like a very rare quality of anybody, character or actual human being walking around. Because you're in Joe's head constantly, you get to know what he thinks about everything. And he even will sometimes call himself on his own bullshit, you know? Like, he is so honest with himself that it's hard to fault him. And it's like, this is just what I do. And I'm killing this person because they need to die. And that's it. You kind of are like, well, I guess he's right. And then you just keep reading, you know?
Right, and it's part of the human condition. No matter what happens, no matter what, we all have, we sit alone with our thoughts. Like, there's that book, The Untethered Soul, that friend told me to read a couple weeks ago, that I'm going through it like, yes, like we all have this need to know how to deal with ourselves. And he does make a solid effort to deal with himself. And that's what I wanted to explore, of how this one person does this over very excruciating times and kind of walks away. Yes, like you said, Barbara, always feeling like it's not his fault, you know. That's
Well, he does. And I wanted to ask you, because I think the library is really interesting in this book, you know, the target for his obsession. And to be fair, he's not a random obsessive. He's a focused obsessive. And then the crimes that occur around that are part of that focus. He's not just like knocking off some.
Yes.
He's seeing him as a threat to, you know, to the focus. But why did you decide on the library? Because Chad's been pointing out, you know, you're way up here in super advanced technology and all. And then a lot of this book takes place in a library, which is a millennial old technology.
Yep, the same kind of selfish reason I put a book in the first book in the bookstore. I love bookstores. I love libraries. I love the way you go in there and it makes you want to fall in love and find a book. Like I wanted him to be the one walking into the book space this time. And I loved the idea of a library. Like I get carried away with the symbolism. I'm like, this is a place where people borrow books. They don't buy them. And this is the most controlling character in the world who doesn't necessarily think of himself that way. So here he is in a place of lending and sharing. And he's like incapable of lending and sharing and giving anyone their space. And I loved that. I just got more and more excited about it. And when I started to read about the area and the library, and when I went online and saw the red bed, I was like, oh my God, it was that feeling of, yes, I was drawn to this and I pursued it. I went with that instinct, even though it seemed, wild to me at times, or like a little not what you would expect. And when I saw the red bed, I thought this is the place for Joe. And I want libraries and bookstores to stay around. So I feel like if we write about them and keep them alive, then they will.
Even if they're a crime scene, right? Well,
yeah. Yes.
All right, we have a body painted on the floor at the Poison Pen. Just it's not a real body, and it was, but like it's drawn around a real person.
Yes. But no one died in there.
Not so far.
Yeah.
No. 31 years, we've been extremely fortunate that nobody has actually died in the bookstore.
That is very fortunate.
You have a basement?
I agree.
What can I say? Right.
Do you have a basement?
No, Arizona doesn't do basements, so it's not, or attics for that matter.
Right.
Mostly it's one-story living due to the climate, and also the geology here pretty much precludes digging. We have a thing called caliche, which is this super hard, impermeable layer. And it's the reason the streets flood a lot. It's the reason, we have that, that sort of classic Western thing, when the box canyon fills up and people drown because the flash flooding and all the rest of it. We've done a way better job than Houston, which apparently decided that, it was okay to pave over all of their natural water tributaries and all, so they can flood on a regular basis. But Arizona's been a little smarter than that. But you'd be amazed when
I like the challenges it presents. This is with me. Yes.
But you really wouldn't want a basement. So that creepy stuff. And if you had an attic,
you can go burn someone up.
Well, you could, but and if you tried to do the whole "don't go up in the attic" routine, everybody would have died of heat stroke in the attic before you got there. So
that's true.
It's not right. It's just a whole different deal. You have to set. Bainbridge Island was a really good choice for this book, I thought. You've already pointed out the island aspect, and the small community aspect, and how people all know each other. So, it's a little bit harder for him to deflect people who want to help. Who is the object of his focus in this book? We haven't actually mentioned her.
Oh yeah, in this book, it's Mary Kay DeMarco, and she is a librarian. She is a mother, and for the first time, I wanted him to meet like a Gen X woman who's sort of in control of her life and but also she's playful. Like she definitely is showing off a little bit for him. For me, she has all these things in common with him. And I wanted us to feel like, yes, this is the one. This is the one.
This could work.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to read to see if it does.
Yep.
Maybe it's a very happy ending, probably, right?
Right. Yes.
So your books have been translated into a television program. I'm sure many people know. It's called You on Netflix, and it's one of their biggest shows. What has that experience been like for you, seeing Joe Goldberg on television, seeing any of these characters come to life, say to some degree your words, and take on kind of this world unto themselves?
It's so wild. I keep going back to this one night. I was in bed, like kind of, wasn't ready to go to sleep. And I turned on the TV and they had this promo and Penn's on there talking to you. And I'm like, okay, this is like the most surreal thing yet. Like my imaginary friend is now on the TV, like, and other people are watching. Like it's wonderful. It's crazy. It's really surreal. And I don't think I'll ever be used to it because for so long, the way a book is, like, it starts out, it's in your head and you don't know if you're crazy. And then for me, I was sharing pages and friends are into it. And then in 2014, off the bat, I had readers like that were so fired up and felt like Joe was real and loved it. And to see this love grow and to have an adaptation is, yeah, it's wild. It's very good.
When you write, do you picture what the characters look like in your head?
It's different for each one. Like with Joe, it wasn't so much that way because it's from his perspective. So it was more like I'd go to the coffee shop and think, there he is. I'd put on a movie and there he is. And I'd see him in different places and going off like my feeling. And I just didn't think, and I thought no matter what I liked about it was that he thinks he's really good looking. And he thinks he's really charming. And so much of life is like how you walk around. So I was interested in like when I would interact with guys that have that thing about them, and and also the way that when you like someone, you think that they look a certain way. Like I remember I used to have a crush on someone years ago and I tell everyone he looks exactly like Richard Marx. And my friends were like, he looks nothing like Richard Marx. I'm like, they are twins. They are twins because when you see something your way and your emotions are at play, who knows what the hell you see?
But
like I always thought, like, who knows what it looks like? Yeah. And then, and then with other characters, like I like to I remember in the first book there's a Natalie Portman reference, and I feel like that's his idea, like especially the movies that he's picking out to select to compare her to, like that's his vision. Who knows if that's the real vision. So the casting is so exciting, and it's another, like it's a whole other dimension of the work, of like that kind of work where their chemistry, the two actors Elizabeth and Penn together, I was like, this is magic. Like
sure.
Yes.
And so as you're writing these books, they're getting adapted into this very popular television show. At a certain point, the churn of TV production schedule starts to catch up to where the source material is. And by season 2, the end of that season is different than the end of the book, Hidden Bodies. Did the TV story in any way affect the story that you were telling? Or are these two different endeavors at this point?
They're two different endeavors for me. Like especially the first 2 books I wrote a few years ago, as people have been saying today, like I've been waiting for 5 years for this book. If you're watching, thank you. Like to hear that is so amazing, to think of people waiting for 5 years and remembering and like wanting to know. I love that. I'm sorry it took so long. I hope you love this one. But I really wanted to, I'm working in that world with that story. I wanted to give that book that those readers have worked so hard for. And then the show, like it's natural for it to have its own world. Like, with your book to film, things change. It's a different medium. When you're reading a book, you're in Joe's head. So you're watching from his perspective. And in the show, I always like you're watching Joe. And for me, those are two very different things, and coming from the same family, from the source material. But I love that phrase, source material, because I feel like where they're all dealing with the same issues and the plot's different, but the hearts of it are very similar.
Well, so the book is the source. This is the genesis of the character, who is like not the title character, but he's the main character. Joe is you. That's all you. That all comes from your book.
Yeah.
And
you know how it is when you sit down to write, no matter what's going on, eventually it's you and that blank page and you got to deal with it. And it's like, fortunately, I like writing that inside of Joe's head. And that for me is why also what I love in books is reading and getting like I feel like I've been ballerina-ish lately because I just read this book, Watch Her Fall by Erin Kelly, and it's all ballet. So I'm like, I'm a ballerina. I'm like reading makes you into a little kid. And now that I say this, I'm like, oh, so reading you makes you into a murderer, but no, it's different. It makes you into a bookworm.
Don't take any responsibility for that.
Yeah.
No, but I feel like I've written for a bunch of different mediums, and to me, books are the kind of purest of the art forms because it's the most singular kind of translation of what's in a person's head to the final finished piece of art. Like with television and movies, the writer, who again is the genesis of all the ideas, the dialogue, the characters, writes a document. That document is then taken and thrown into a whirlwind of studio and network TV executives who tear it apart, put it back together. There's then going to be a director who's going to do a rewrite on it. There's going to be actors who want their characters changed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then even by the time you shoot whatever that piece of paper contained, it now has to be edited. Maybe there's going to be reshoots. They might have to recast somebody. They're going to get 10 different people to rewrite it anyway. So whatever that original idea is, by the time something is made as a movie or TV show, with extremely rare exception, the original piece of art is destroyed. It is not recognizable as what the writer intended. Whereas in books, nobody else is doing anything. Maybe you have an editor who's like giving you some notes, or your publisher is like, I don't know if we can have him kill this many people. Can we take off one kill maybe in this book? Have him murder just one less person? You know, maybe you get something like that. But at the end of the day, it's still you putting every word in the place that it is when that piece of art is shown to the public. For me, that is what makes books like by far my favorite thing to write.
Well, it's for me, it's like it's just you and the page. So you're doing a lot in your head, and no two people are reading the same book because they're reading it with their experiences and their, you know, frame of reference, and things are striking them that aren't striking another reader. I love that part of it. So I like knowing that, like, I'll get messages about the same thing from people that loved it and people that didn't love it, you know, and you know that, like, when you're watching something, yes, it's so many different artists coming together. So it's so different.
And it's, you know,
And you can just be like, yes, we're flying to the beach now, you know, like you don't have to think about a schedule.
yeah, or a production budget or any of that. And there's so much money put against like a television production or a movie or whatever. There's so much writing on it that a lot of times I feel like the creative kind of impulse, which is all a book is literally just creative impulse and somebody like typing it out. But in movies, that just gets like, or TV too, it just gets stamped down for the bottom line of what the final product is going to be. What will the profits be? What do the algorithms tell us will be good and we'll get eyeballs on our screens?
Before this, I made a short film, and I remember it was an adaptation of a short story. And I was like, I'm just going to take the short story, plop it into Final Draft. And it's like, no, as soon as you go into that medium, your own work doesn't look the same to you. Like nothing feels the same. Nothing looks the same. The locations, like all of it. So yes, I very much wanted to squirrel away and write a book and be like, I didn't know, no one's going to come up and ask me for a permit.
That's right.
Yes.
No permits required to write a book. That is true.
Yes.
So,
That is, you know, that's so interesting. Let me just say something that we talk about a lot here at the store. Well, we don't do it as much right now because we don't have live events. We're doing Zoom, but over the years, as we have hosted events and as cell phone technology has advanced, what we've observed is every single person now shows up with a phone, a camera in hand. And part of the reason they are there is to tell a story about themselves and why they are there. And, you know, and that they are there. I mean, we even see it, we're the Outlander bookstore. So, you know, it has exploded from the original Outlander, my neighbor and friend Diana and I together in 1992 or whatever it was, to what you see today. So we've been, you know, a part of that whole journey. And when we do some of the Outlander events, people come in costume, they come bringing cardboard, you know, mock-ups. So one of them brought a Jamie so she could sit next to him, you know, during the program, the whole bit. And what you realize is that this technology and all these platforms that we've been discussing, like Instagram in particular, but also TikTok, allows people to dramatize their own lives. You know, that they are creating their story and they have a place to publish it that was not accessible before. So I often wonder if some of the magic of movies or television is watered down by that, or whether it makes people more determined to find that bigger platform that they, you know, they get like 100 Instagram followers and then they get 10,000 Instagram followers. And does that mean that they now want to have, like, you know, a TV show where they get millions of eyeballs? I mean, I'm wondering, since everyone now can write it their own story and present it, I'm wondering what effect that's going to have long-term on viewing and on reading.
And storytelling.
I think it's fascinating.
I mean, you mentioned it being watered down, the relevance of television movies. I would say it's completely irrelevant now in terms of cultural implications. Social media is all that matters. And
No!
it's true. Sorry to say it, but it is. The primary relationships we all have with everyone are parasocial. Like we're looking at each other through Instagram and TikTok and whatever.
But we need stuff to talk about. And we're talking about the books and the movies and the TV shows.
For sure. For sure. But even like what we're doing right now is a parasocial relationship with whoever is watching this. And we're talking about a book. But like, you know,
No,
Cristiano Ronaldo has, what's up?
Nothing, go ahead.
I was just going to say Cristiano Ronaldo has like 200 million Instagram followers. There's no TV show on planet Earth that will ever have that many viewers or movie.
But then you have to ask yourself, what's the pressure on somebody like that to keep up, you know, to keep the storytelling to. I just read a debut novel. I mean, I'm 80, so I have some trouble relating. Thank you. Relating, yes, I'm on Instagram all the time. This is my unadulterated thing. But in reading it last night, it was hard for me to sort of get the dynamic, but basically the main character, her entire life and validity, everything is all about social media. It's like reading junior high school, where the most popular girl, the mean girl, but the most popular girl, and everybody, wanted to orbit around her or own a little piece of her in order to make themselves be more, more popular, more noticed. But the entire mechanism of it is through social media. It's through Facebook is the big one in this, but also through Instagram and so forth. And none of that relationship is real. And then what happens if you want to meet that person? I mean, we're back to Joe here again, right? In a way, what happens if you go off that social media anonymity and you actually have to meet that person and have a relationship?
Yeah, that's what's interesting, what's changed and what was weird about this year. I remember when it started, I was like, well, what is the point when everything in life and human beings is chemistry? That you could talk to someone online for weeks and it could be great, but then in person, there's just not that chemistry. So why are people doing this? And now in this year, when we've all been home doing this all the time, it fascinates me because I feel like it's made relationships that are great in that parasocial way on fire. And then other people that are in relationships where it's like, it's more about just being in the space together. So this is really interesting. I'm excited to see the books that come out of this time for that reason. Yeah.
I think so too. And actually trying to work out how to deal with the pandemic. This question comes up with virtually, I hate that adverb. I've got to find another adverb. But anyway, with most of the events that we do, the question does arise, are you going to write about the pandemic? Are you going to write around it? Are you going to write before it? Are you going to skip over it? And since we don't really even know how it's going to play out, skipping over it has its own set of difficulties.
The book, The Boston Girl, there's a great line. It's the pandemic, and she says, after it was over, we didn't talk about it. No one wanted to talk about it. And I read it this summer and I was like, wait a minute, where's the part about the pandemic? That's really? And I got this weird feeling because Chad's read part of the first draft of my next book, where I was writing about it. And now I'm like going back in because I'm like, I don't really want to read this yet. Like there's no distance, So I don't know if I want to write it. What about you, Chad?
Yeah, for me, I'm working on something right now that's like, it doesn't ignore it. It's not about it, but it still is set in like today, like the contemporary times. And so there's not really talk of like, well, I got to get my vaccine or this grocery store shut down, but there's just little things like this guy's wearing a mask or this guy's not. And that's it. Just like a little peppering that it's like, it acknowledges what's happening. I think you have to if you're writing about anything that's happening in like a real world. But it is like, yeah, nobody wants to dwell on it. Certainly nobody wants to like watch a TV show about the pandemic or anything right now because we're hoping to not be in it anymore.
Yes.
I think,
but I couldn't not write a draft where it was all, what would Joe do with this? Because it was like making my head explode all year where I'm like, oh my God, like this is too much. I have to get out of my system. Yes.
For what it's worth, the stuff you let me read, I thank you for letting me read it. It was fantastic. I was like, this is how you handle a pandemic. Like, here it is. It's done.
Wow. You could do the template then for authors to come. Why don't we summon Patrick back up out of the black hole?
Hey,
he has readers' questions and things. So
I'm
isn't
here.
that great how he comes back?
I'm here. Yeah.
It's kind of like a magic act.
I like that. Yes.
Like the great Mephisto, shows up.
Yeah, you've got a lot of people watching, and it's been a great conversation. It seems like a lot of the questions people are asking are inevitably, is there going to be a fourth Joe novel? I don't think you've actually said yet. There will.
Yes, it's due. I'm like, that's where this energy is always funny because I'm so excited about this book and thank you everyone for being here. And I'm so excited for it to be out. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, you gotta write the next one. Like you gotta write the next, you gotta keep working on it. Like, yeah. So yes, that's a sure thing.
Right.
She said as she sat down and kept talking and not writing. Yeah.
Let's see.
It's a legitimate work break. Just enjoy.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right. Let's see. Colleen asks, will we learn more about Joe's background in the third book? He's such an interesting character in his black and white appraisals of others, often rapidly vacillating between adoration and disdain of others. I'm interested to know more about how he became who he is.
Colleen, that is so well said about, I think about that all the time. You're either on the pedestal or you're on the ground and he's kicking you. And that I feel like is the heart of his kind of problem. And also the reason his attention span is so in extreme, because he at first is motivated to keep someone on that pedestal. And he gets mad when they do things that make them not up there, which is totally unfair. So in this book, just because he's become a father, yes, you're going to learn a little bit more about his mother here and there and his background. But I always think of Joe as living aggressively in the present, in the moment. So like I let it, when it feels like a moment for, oh yeah, he'd be thinking about his own mom right here, I go there. And then, yeah, this is where it's hard to talk without giving things away. So I think I should leave it at that.
There are a few questions about the audiobook. And what a tremendous job your reader is doing. What do you have to say about that?
Montana is amazing. And early on, they sent me a few YouTube videos. I put on Santino, I walked in the other room, I ran back in like, that's him. And they asked if I listened to the other ones, and I feel like I said I did. And I did eventually, but I was like, that's him. It was, those moments in life when you're so sure of something. I love that feeling when you have no doubt, It's like eating a pizza when you want a pizza. It's like, I heard Santino, I'm like, that's it. Yes.
Okay, Christina asks, and I think this is for both of you. Just knocked the TV off the counter here. What are you currently reading, and what have you enjoyed recently?
I just finished Red Widow, which was amazing. That's Alma Katsu. I feel like I'm not so good at talking out loud, so I might mispronounce anything too. And I just got the new Riley Sager, so I just started that, and I'm done. I'm really into that right now. I've had a good run with books.
Good. I'm glad you like the Katsu. We did an event for Alma, and I thought it was a wonderful book and so different from The Hunger and from the Titanic book.
Yeah, that's what I love about her. I'm like, oh my God. And then the way it's like, oh yeah, I was in the CIA. I'm like, she's just so cool. Like it's, yeah.
She really is. Yeah. No, and fortunately, you'll be happy to know she signed a contract for the sequel.
Yes, good.
So I'm really pleased about that. Right. How about you, Chad? What have you been reading?
Unfortunately, I've been sucked down a hole of The Bachelor. I don't know if you know that reality television show.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, I'm doing a book right now called How to Win the Bachelor that'll be out in January, and it's like kind of a statistical breakdown of the game components of the show. And if you read it, it kind of presents it as a sport. And if you read it and you're trying to go into the game, you'll win the game basically if you follow these strategies. So the only things I've been reading are my own extensive spreadsheets of every play that's ever been made in the history of the game. I literally have no time to read anything for pleasure at this point because I'm trying to crank this book out.
Are you doing anything with game theory as part of all that?
Absolutely.
I think game theory is absolutely fascinating. I wrote a thesis on it when I was in one of my graduate degree programs. And that was a long time ago, as you've already worked out. And I'm just wondering if it's changed very much.
No, it's still like the kind of core components of game theory are still the same. When you apply them to different structures, obviously, which The Bachelor has strangely enough, a pretty complex game structure. And when you apply it to that, it offers you kind of like a tree of different strategies you can use in any given situation, depending on where you might find yourself in the game.
And it's how many seasons to analyze? This is the
25th season just ended a couple weeks ago.
But Joe is basically doing a form of game theory.
Yes, he is.
I mean, if you think about it, you can really apply it to that. My husband and I are tournament bridge players. We met actually playing against each other.
Really?
And so,
was that in person or online?
No, it was in person a long time ago, 33 years ago, actually. But
who won the game you were playing? I want to know everything.
Me too. I'm like, can we please have an hour?
Why don't we start with this? Yeah.
I haven't even heard this.
He accused me of cheating and called the director, and the director came over, listened to it, ruled in my favor. And as I was about to dust him out of life forever, because I was so pissed at him, I happened to glance at his scorecard and realized that when I worked at the Library of Congress, I had met his grandparents. His grandfather, Lessing Rosenwald, next to Thomas Jefferson, is the largest donator of books to the Library of Congress. And I worked there and I met him. And so I looked back at my husband and I said, "Are you Lessing Rosenwald's grandson?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, then you're probably not the shit I think you are." And so that was it. We went on from there. library.
I
It's
love that.
funny, we did an event at the library. It's a video still on the Library of Congress website. We did a program for them in which we all agreed that the Library of Congress had been the yunta in our relationship.
That is fascinating.
Isn't that great stuff? I know.
That's incredible.
It
It
was.
really
Well,
is.
What was the next date after that, if we may ask? I'm very curious.
I don't remember. There was still a lot of bridge, but the interesting part is because if you really apply game theory to relationships, we agreed that when we married, we would give up playing tournament bridge
Oh,
because
you
it's way
competitive
too
things?
dangerous on relationships and way too stressful. So,
And did you stick to that? Did you?
Yep, we
Yep.
absolutely have.
what did you take up in its place?
Nothing. Books. I opened a bookstore.
Nice.
Great.
You just quit cold turkey.
What
Well,
happens if the two of you play?
There's a lot of
tennis?
game theory in actually running a bookstore. If you think about it, Patrick and I, we should talk about it at some point. You'd be amazed.
Every aspect of life, I feel like.
Yeah.
Competition.
Oh, that's true. All right, Patrick, sorry, we got completely off track there.
My
I
Well,
apologies.
this is fascinating. I haven't heard some of this stuff.
thought everybody knew about the Library of Congress as the yunta in my marriage.
I knew that, but some
I'm
of
never
the-
going to
some
look
of
at the
the-
Library of Congress again the same way.
It's really
Some of the
true.
minutia I hadn't heard.
Matchmaker.
Yeah.
God, that's fascinating.
Let's see. A lot of people are just saying, how much they like your books, and
Thank
they're
you.
tuning in from all over the place. Australia,
Yeah.
Chattanooga, Tennessee. Trying to see if there are any more actual questions.
That's also why this is so cool.
Yeah.
Chattanooga and
Oh,
Australia can
and-
watch together.
any word on when the third season will start?
I know that it will, but I don't know exactly when. But I know that it will, so that's good. Yes.
Everything's
very
been
good.
Uh-huh.
up
And
in the
also, I'm
air.
so afraid of revealing the details. I don't want to be the one to but it's coming, and they'll let you know. Netflix is good about that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So Chad, did you have any final questions that you might want to ask Caroline before we sign off?
Well, there is a movie that we both enjoy called Grown Ups 2.
Yay, us too.
What is your favorite moment from Grown Ups 2?
Oh my gosh, I just watched it the other day, and I'm gonna blush because I don't want to be admitting that. But the other day when I watched it, something that I don't always notice is when the dance scene. It was really sweet, really.
You derived some moment of genuine sincerity out of that movie. Your favorite
Yes.
moment of it is this really touched me.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That is amazing.
Yep.
Well,
What movie is this?
congratulations.
Thank you. What about yours?
Mine is definitely when Schwarzenegger's kid, they do that weird push in on him when he's in a raft out in the lake, and he looks right into the camera and goes, "Summertime." It's the
Summertime.
most surreal, bizarre moment. I've rewound that 100,000 times at this point.
Right. I like the car wash. Uh-oh, now I'm just gonna start naming every
Yeah.
moment. But yeah, the car wash too.
For
What
anybody
movie
who
is
hasn't
this? What movie?
Grown
are you
ups
talking-
too.
What is it?
Grown ups too.
Grown Ups 2.
And wait, is the dancing in Grown Ups 1? I watched them both a few times in a row. In the background, I know it's not like I sit here like paying attention like this. I just like them there.
for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's you just have to see it. There's
Yeah.
something so incredible about Adam Sandler movies once they hit a certain point. Once he's now just doing this kind of machine labor of making a movie every year so he can employ the 200 people that work for him on the cruise, and the scripts are whatever they are. There's not going to be a rewrite. It's just we're shooting this and we're putting it on Netflix or whatever. Grown Ups 2 really, I think, was the first movie in that direction, in my opinion.
But
Okay.
but also this the spirit, the spontaneity. Did you know that the scene with the rope swing, the tire?
Mhm.
I feel like that happened. That was something that happened along the way, because I read that they found the tire, or he was like, how come we don't have, they thought it would look funny. I like how they're all making it up as they go along. And I think that's why they're so childlike and good in spirit. That's why I like to watch them.
God, it's just an
That
incredible
and
the opening
Schwarzenegger's
scene.
acting.
The
No.
opening scene of that movie. I don't want to give it away. You've never seen anything like it in cinematic history, ever. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Just
And
even
the
look for that on
breaking- yeah,
YouTube.
The breaking of the fourth wall out of nowhere too. In
Yeah.
Blended. Blended is another one of our favorites.
God, any Sandler movie really any Sandler movie. You should watch every Sandler movie back to back to back to back to back when you have a free weekend.
Now you've inspired us to watch The Bachelor, but I guess we're going to have to wait until your book comes out before we really do that. I'm going to make a pitch for Call My Agent, which is my favorite thing that has been on Netflix for quite a while. It's hilarious. So, and some of the characters that were on it have now been recycled because they're real actors. And so you can see them in other roles. Anyway, this has really been a lot of fun. Thank you so very much for allowing us to do this with you two today. What a treat.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your love story.
Absolutely.
Oh, you're welcome. There's
My
actually a Rosenwald librarian at the Library of Congress. So I like to say I left the library, but now I have my own librarian, so it's a lot of fun. I want to remind everybody that we do have, we know they're on their way to us, autographed copies of You Love Me by Carolyn, which we urge you to buy and support her. And let us thank Chad and Carolyn for joining us. There'll be a podcast of this, and this Facebook video will live forever. And Patrick very well will put it on YouTube as well. So many platforms. Feel free to encourage your friends to enjoy our program for this afternoon. And congratulations, Carolyn, on publishing yet another book.
Thank you very much. I'm like, oh yeah, this has been sitting here for a while, but
I know it should be wine, but I couldn't quite start at 4 o'clock. But I'm heading to the kitchen for a glass before the 5:15
time.
Yes. Right. So in any case, Patrick, thank you as always for your sterling. He's the producer of our programs. When they ask us for a run of show, they always do now, the publicists, I just laugh because there isn't one, you know?
I love the way, everyone's been supposed to just take on all these new jobs and identities and skill sets.
Well, but I mean, the thing is, the conversation develops as it develops. And if you tried to have a run of show, it just wouldn't work at all. So, you know, I love the way they just kind of organically wander off however they want into stupid personal history stories, for example. So anyway, it was great to meet both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night, everybody.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.